What happens when you reach enlightenment, the Buddha's real answer? What if everything you thought you knew about peace was just the beginning of something far deeper? This video is not just another meditation guide or spiritual lecture. It's an invitation crafted with care and grounded in timeless wisdom for those of us who have seen life unfold over 5, 6, or even 7 decades. Whether you're standing in the quiet of retirement or still moving through the rhythms of daily life, one question keeps echoing. Is there more to this life than the pain, the noise, and the endless chase? Today we confront that question head-on. But fair warning, the answer may not come with fireworks or a blinding light. It might come in a whisper, in stillness, in truth. The Buddha didn't promise celestial fanfare. What he did offer was something far more radical, an end to suffering. Not through running away, but by finally seeing clearly, by letting go, by waking up. This isn't just for monks. This isn't just for those born into temples. This is for you, for me, for all of us who have weathered the storm and are ready, now more than ever, to lay the burden down. Inside this video lies a journey, layered with practical insight, ancient stories, and moments of powerful clarity. You'll discover what enlightenment really means and what it doesn't. Why this wisdom is more important after 50 than ever before. How everyday moments can become doorways to peace. Real-life examples of people who found freedom not in escape, but in understanding. So don't skip ahead. Stay with us. Every moment of this video builds upon the last, and by the end, you may not just understand enlightenment more clearly. You might begin to feel it. This is not just a video. It's a quiet revolution. And it starts now. There's a soft murmur that begins to stir as we age, a question that gets louder with each quiet morning. Is there more to this life than pain, chasing, and uncertainty? For those of us over 50 who have seen decades bloom and wither, the hunger for something real, lasting, serene, and unspeakably true grows deeper. You may not be seeking flashing lights, cosmic downloads, or mystical raptures. You may simply want peace. The Buddha promised something radical in its simplicity. Enlightenment is not the spectacular arrival of something new, but the gentle release of what was never ours to begin with, illusion, clinging, and the storm within. In this long, reflective journey, we will explore what it truly means to be enlightened. Not as a distant, mythical state reserved for monks in caves, but as a living, breathing possibility, especially relevant and accessible to those of us in the second half of life. Chapter 1: What Enlightenment is Not, Dissolving the Myths. Let's start by clearing the fog. Enlightenment is not a lightning bolt from the sky. It's not a trance, a magical superpower, or a one-way ticket to blissed out euphoria. In fact, if what you're picturing sounds flashy or grand, chances are it's not what the Buddha meant. Many people think enlightenment looks like glowing auras, levitation, or mind reading. We've seen the books, the movies, the posters, saints with halos and serene smiles floating above worldly troubles. It all seems so otherworldly. But the truth, enlightenment is not an escape from life, it's an embrace of it. According to the Buddha, these mystical phenomena are just that, phenomena, interesting, sure, meaningful, maybe, but enlightenment doesn't depend on them. In fact, the pursuit of such things can become just another craving, a spiritual disguise for the same old grasping. Enlightenment is not becoming superhuman, gaining supernatural powers, escaping ordinary reality, merging with some cosmic god. Instead, it's profoundly human, it's seeing clearly, it's being utterly and peacefully awake. To be enlightened is to walk through life without being tangled in it, not because you're numb, but because you're free. Free from illusions, free from the constant hunger for more, free from the lie that this moment isn't enough. Let me tell you a story. There was an elderly woman who lived in a quiet village. One day, she visited a monastery and asked the head monk, "Can someone like me, someone who never had time to meditate for hours a day, can I still be enlightened? The monk didn't answer right away. He simply placed his hands gently on the old wooden table in front of them. Then he said, if you can see this table as it truly is, not as something to cling to, not as something to push away, but just as it is, then you are already closer to freedom than most seekers will ever be. It wasn't a riddle, it was a teaching. Enlightenment doesn't wait in a distant temple. It reveals itself when we stop chasing, when we stop trying to bend life to fit our desires, when we stop running from discomfort and start facing what is. If you're over 50, you already understand impermanence better than most. You've loved and lost, you've watched things fall apart, you've held on and you've let go. This isn't theory for you, it's real. And that's why the truth of enlightenment is closer to you than you might think. It's not something you need to earn. It's not a reward for being holy. It's the simple clarity that comes when the fog of craving lifts. It's that moment when you sit with your morning tea and don't wish it were different. It's when you hear someone you love speak harshly to you, and instead of reacting with anger or defensiveness, you feel compassion for them and for yourself. It's when the world feels heavy, but you no longer carry it all alone. Sometimes the greatest illusion is the idea that awakening is somewhere else, somewhere over there. But the Buddha's wisdom invites us back here, to this moment, this breath. This body, this life, the most sacred truth of all. You don't have to be anyone else to be free. You just have to be here, fully, openly, and lovingly, with what already is. Chapter 2, The Buddha's True Vision, the End of Suffering. Let's strip it back. Enlightenment isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you've always been before the world taught you to be afraid. At the heart of the Buddha's awakening was a discovery so honest, so clear, and so universally human that it remains just as urgent today as it was 2,500 years ago. Life contains suffering, no frills, no sugar coating. The Buddha didn't pretend everything was fine. He didn't teach people to be endlessly positive or to chant their pain away. He looked life in the eye and said, there is suffering. And in that simple act of truth-telling, a revolution began. He called it the Four Noble Truths, not as dogma, but as a map. One life involves suffering. Aging, illness, loss, uncertainty, even the discomfort of wanting things to stay the same, they're all part of the human package. 2, suffering comes from craving. We suffer not because of life itself, but because we cling to youth, to success, to people, to control. We resist change. We want permanence in a world built on impermanence. 3, suffering can end. This is the good news. It doesn't have to stay this way. There's a way out, not by numbing ourselves, but by waking up to how things really are. 4, there's a path to that freedom. The noble eightfold path isn't a doctrine. It's a way of living with wisdom, kindness, and awareness, a way to walk through the fire without being burned by it. Now pause for a moment and let that settle, because for many of us over 50, life has already given us the evidence. We've been through the heartbreak, the disappointment, the letting go, and if we're being honest, the pain didn't come just from the event itself, it came from our resistance to it, from clinging to how we thought life should go. But here's what's radical. The Buddha never told us to suppress desire. He showed us how to understand it, how to see it clearly and let it soften on its own. Like steam rising from a cup of tea, it dissolves naturally when we stop gripping it. Let me tell you a short story about Tom, a Vietnam veteran in his late 60s, once shared his story in a small Dharma circle. He spoke of the nightmares, the guilt, the years he spent fighting battles long after the war had ended. But what changed everything for him wasn't medication or denial, it was learning how to sit with the pain instead of running from it. One day, he said, I just breathed with it, and the pain didn't leave, but something did. The war inside me stopped. That's the core of the Buddha's vision. Not that suffering disappears, but that our relationship to it changes. It's like laying down a heavy bag you didn't even realize you were carrying. The weight didn't kill you, but carrying it everywhere sure made life harder than it had to be. What the Buddha awakened to was not some cosmic secret. It was the possibility of peace in the middle of life, right here, in this aging body. In this imperfect moment, in this tender, breakable, beautiful human experience. And this matters so much more the older we get, because let's be honest, when we're young, we think we have time to outrun suffering. We think we can fix, improve, control, or distract ourselves away from pain. But as we grow older, we start to see that peace doesn't come from having everything in place. It comes from no longer needing everything to be in place. So what did the Buddha actually teach us? That suffering is real, but it's not final. That desire is natural, but it doesn't have to run your life. That pain is part of being alive, but peace is too. And most of all, that the freedom you seek is not found in some far-off state, but in the gentle act of being present with what is, and letting go of what never really belonged to you in the first place. So the next time suffering arises, don't see it as a sign that you failed. See it as a doorway, a sacred invitation, a teacher whispering, there's a softer way. Because that's the Buddha's true vision, not escape, not perfection, but liberation through wisdom, compassion, and the courageous act of being fully, tenderly human. Chapter 3: Daily Moments of Nirvana, Enlightenment in Everyday Life. Let's be honest, when we hear the word nirvana, it often feels unreachable. Like it belongs in monasteries, in mountain caves, or maybe in another lifetime entirely. But that's not how the Buddha saw it. Nirvana isn't locked away in some sacred temple. It's here, in your kitchen, in your garden, in the way you sit quietly when the sun comes through the window and everything slows down for just a moment. If suffering begins in the mind, then freedom begins there too. The truth is, enlightenment doesn't require you to escape your life. It asks you to step more fully into it, with eyes open, breath steady, and a heart that can hold both joy and sorrow without being broken by either. The Buddha gave us a path for this, the noble eightfold path, but don't let the name intimidate you. These aren't commandments or rituals, they're gentle invitations, ways of walking through life with grace, honesty, and attention. Let's look at them one by one, not as theories, but as doorways to daily peace. 1. Right view. This doesn't mean seeing with your eyes, but with your heart. It means understanding that life is ever-changing, and suffering is part of the deal, but not the whole deal. It's about seeing clearly without blame or illusion. 2. Right intention. Every day we make small choices. Do we move from love or fear, from kindness or ego? Right intention is the quiet decision to lean into compassion, even when it's hard. 3. Right speech. Words matter, especially the ones we speak to ourselves. This path teaches us to speak in ways that heal, not harm. Not just sweet talk, but truth spoken with care. 4. Right action. How we move in the world matters. Not just big decisions, but the small ones too. How we treat the grocery clerk, how we respond to a frustrating moment. Right action is living in alignment with your deepest values. 5. Right livelihood. This is about integrity. Earning a living in ways that do exploit, that don't wound others or ourselves. It's about asking, does my work nourish the world or drain it? 6. Right effort. This isn't about pushing harder. It's about choosing wisely where to put your energy, feeding what uplifts, letting go of what drags you down. 7. Right mindfulness, the heart of it all, paying attention, truly being where you are, washing the dishes while washing the dishes, as Thich Nhat Hanh would say, being fully present in your one precious life. 8. Right concentration. This is the ability to rest the mind, to focus, to sit with the silence inside you long enough to hear something true. None of these are about being perfect, they're about being awake. And if you've lived long enough to know that life doesn't always go to plan, then you're already halfway there. Let me tell you a short story about a woman named Lan. Was a retired teacher in her 70s, living alone after her husband passed away. She didn't know much about Buddhism, she wasn't particularly religious, but every morning she would take a short walk through her garden. One day, in the depth of her grief, she began to notice her footsteps, the crunch of leaves, the weight of her body, the rise and fall of her breath. "I wasn't trying to meditate," she told me once. "I was just trying to remember how to be alive." Over time, that walk became her ritual. Not to escape her pain, but to walk with it, to carry it gently, to let it move through her without shutting her down. That, in its purest form, is practice. That is nirvana in motion. You see, we don't have to renounce the world to wake up. We don't have to shave our heads, sit in caves, or chant in languages we don't understand. We can live the Dharma by how we listen to our grandchildren, by how we pause before we react, by how we forgive even when the past still aches. The miracle of nirvana is not that it erases suffering, but that it changes the way we carry it. It softens our grip. It teaches us to breathe with life, not fight it. And sometimes the most sacred practice is simply stopping long enough to notice. This moment, just as it is enough, not perfect, not painless, but complete. So if you've been wondering whether awakening is meant for someone else in some other place, let me say this as clearly as I can. Nirvana is not out there. It's in the way you show up to your life today. It's in the peace you offer yourself after a lifetime of striving. And you who have lived and loved and lost, you are not too late. You are, in fact, right on time. Chapter 4, Beyond Buddhism, Universal Wisdom for Every Seeker. Some truths are too vast to belong to one tradition. While the Buddha gave us a language and a path, the heart of enlightenment, the ending of suffering, the return to peace, is not exclusive to Buddhism. In fact, if you listen closely, you'll hear echoes of the Dharma in the most unexpected places. In Christian mysticism, in Sufi poetry, in indigenous prayers, in the quiet resilience of a parent burying a child, or an old man sitting alone at sunrise, smiling without reason. Because before we were Buddhists, Christians, seekers, skeptics, we were simply human, and suffering has always been our teacher, peace always our shared longing. You see, the real beauty of what the Buddha taught is not that it's Buddhist. It's that it's true, and truth has no flag. It doesn't ask for your loyalty, it only asks for your attention. Universal truths from other paths. The Christian mystics spoke of dying before you die, a poetic way of saying, let go of the false self, the ego, the clinging, the mask, and you will meet eternal life. Sound familiar? The Sufis, lovers of God in the Islamic world, dance in circles not to escape the world, but to dissolve the illusion of separation. To return to unity, Rumi wrote, don't seek love, simply remove the blocks to love. In Taoism, the way is found in water, soft, yielding, humble, and yet it carves through rock. It doesn't force, it flows, much like mindfulness itself. What all these paths share is not belief, but experience. The direct experience of stillness, compassion, presence, a freedom that doesn't depend on outer conditions but grows like a quiet fire inside. When we cling too tightly to labels, we forget the essence. A wise teacher once said, if you point to the moon and someone grabs the finger instead of looking up, that's religion. But if they look past the finger and see the moon, that's wisdom. So here's the invitation. Whatever path brought you here, whether you've sat in temples or just carried quiet questions in your heart for years, let it all be welcome. Let your grandmother's rosary, your meditation cushion, your long walks by the river, all be part of the same sacred thread. Because what matters isn't the form, it's the transformation. Are you more patient now than you were 10 years ago, more able to hold pain without turning bitter, more present with your loved ones, even as your body slows? Then something is awakening in you, and you don't need anyone's permission to call it sacred. There's a story about a man named David, a Jewish carpenter from New Jersey, spent decades reading every spiritual book he could find, from the Bhagavad Gita to the Book of Psalms. He never chose one tradition. I'm not sure I ever found God, he once said with a chuckle, but I did find stillness. and I figured if God's anywhere, he's probably in that. At the end of his life, he had no grand doctrine to pass on, just one simple instruction: take care of each other and don't waste a sunrise. It may not sound like scripture, but it is. Because universal wisdom lives not in grand temples, but in the way we treat the checkout clerk, the way we comfort a crying child, the way we listen when we don't feel like it. It's not in what we say we believe. It's in how we show up when no one's watching. The Buddha would have smiled at that, because awakening isn't about being a better Buddhist. It's about being more human. And if your practice, whatever shape it takes, helps you love a little deeper, listen a little longer, and live with a little less fear, then you're already on the path. You don't need a label, you don't need a robe. You just need a willing heart and the humility to begin again. Because the path is wide, and truth wears many names, but peace feels the same in every language. Chapter 5: The Real Work of Awakening, Compassion in Action. Enlightenment isn't just about inner peace. It's not a private retreat into serenity while the world burns. If awakening is real, it must touch the way we live, the way we respond, and the way we show up for others, especially when it's inconvenient. This is where many spiritual paths fall short. They talk about rising above pain, above the ego, above the world. But the Buddha didn't rise above suffering, he walked straight into it. And he taught us to do the same, not to drown in it, but to transform it with the only force strong enough to heal it: compassion. Because the truth is, we don't become enlightened instead of being human. We become enlightened through our humanity. Compassion isn't a feeling, it's a verb, it's how awakening moves, it's love with its sleeves rolled up. If you're reading this and you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s, or beyond, you already know this. Life humbles you, you lose people, you watch dreams shift. The things you used to fight for start to matter less in the quiet moments. A shared meal, a phone call, the laughter of your grandchildren begin to mean everything. This is fertile ground for compassion, because compassion grows strongest in hearts that have been broken and kept on loving anyway. It shows up in small acts, calling a friend who's grieving, even when you don't know what to say. Forgiving someone not because they earned it, but because you're tired of carrying the weight. Holding space for your adult children's mistakes without judgment. Giving someone your full attention when you yourself feel unseen. None of these acts will make the headlines, but they're what keep the world from falling apart. They're what the Buddha meant when he said, "Thousands of candles can be lit from a single candle, and the life of the candle will not be shortened." Here's a short story from the hospital. Maria was a retired nurse in her 70s. After surviving breast cancer, she volunteered weekly at a hospice center. One day, a young man in his 30s, dying of AIDS, asked her, "Do you believe in God?" She said, "Right now, I believe in warm blankets, someone to hold your hand, and people who don't leave when it gets hard. If God is anywhere, he's probably here, quiet, small, and trying not to cry." That was compassion. And for that man, it was God enough, because the most enlightened people don't announce their awakening. They fold laundry for their dying spouse. They bring soup to a neighbor. They choose kindness when no one would blame them for being angry. They don't look like saints, they look like you. They are you. The Dalai Lama once said, "If you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion." That's not a slogan, it's a road map. When we suffer, the ego shrinks in and says, "Me, my pain, my story." And it's valid, we must honor our wounds. But if we stay there too long, we harden, we close, we become brittle. Compassion softens the edges, it reminds us, I'm not alone, my pain is part of a larger whole, and maybe someone else is hurting too. True spiritual maturity isn't measured by how still you can sit in meditation. It's measured by how gently you move through the world afterward. It's how you treat the tired waitress. It's whether you make room for someone else's story. It's how much of your peace spills over into someone else's storm. So ask yourself, not as a moral test, but as a spiritual check-in, Who in my life needs less advice and more presence? Where am I being invited to respond with gentleness instead of defense? What small act of kindness can I offer today simply because I can? Because in the end, awakening isn't proven by what we believe. It's revealed by how we love, and compassion is not the result of enlightenment. It's the practice of enlightenment. Every time you choose to love anyway, to care anyway, to show up anyway, you're not moving away from awakening. You're walking right into it, with open hands, with a steady heart. With a peace that doesn't close its eyes to the world, but holds it with reverence. Because that, dear friend, is the real work, and the world needs you, not once you're perfect, but exactly as you are, awakened enough to care. Chapter 6, Enlightenment is not the end, living awake until the last breath. Some believe enlightenment is a finish line, like once you've crossed it, the journey ends. But the truth, as the Buddha taught and lived, is far more subtle, more alive. Awakening isn't an escape from life. It's the deepest way of living it, fully, honestly, moment by moment, breath by breath, until the very end. Because even after awakening, there's still laundry, there's still illness, there's still heartbreak, and yes, there is still death. But something fundamental has changed. You're no longer a leaf tossed by every wind, you're the stillness beneath the storm. You know that thoughts come and go, that emotions rise and fall. That this body will one day fail, but the peace you've discovered is not so fragile, it stays. And when the end draws near, that peace becomes your greatest companion, a reflection on aging and letting go. As we age, we're slowly invited to let go of identities, roles, ambitions, even memories. This isn't punishment, it's a kind of spiritual preparation. In our youth, we accumulate, we build, we reach. But the second half of life, it's about release, about softening, about remembering what truly matters. This isn't giving up. It's waking up, and that in itself is enlightenment, to meet each phase of life not with resistance, but with presence. And one last story is about an old woman named Alina, was 84 when she entered hospice. A retired librarian, a mother of 3, a quiet woman who rarely spoke of religion. But in her final weeks, the nurses noticed something unusual. She smiled, constantly, gently, even as her body weakened. One nurse asked her, "Aren't you afraid?" Alina looked at her and said, "I spent my life clinging to things I thought I needed, security, approval, control. I don't have any of those now, and oddly, I've never felt freer." I think this is what I've been searching for all along. No fireworks, no visions, just peace. That is awakening. It doesn't always arrive in meditation halls. Sometimes it finds us in a hospital bed in the embrace of surrender when we finally stop trying to hold the river still. Death as the final teacher. In Buddhism, we are taught to contemplate death, not morbidly but wisely. Not to fear it, but to let it shape how we live. Because when you know everything is passing, you begin to cherish what's here. You don't waste time on grudges, you say, "I love you" more. You listen longer, you stop waiting for someday. And when death comes, not as an enemy, but as a natural closing, you don't greet it with terror. You greet it like an old friend, a hand at the end of a long dance. You look back at your life, not with regret, but with tenderness. You see your flaws, your messes, your failed plans, and you bless them. You remember your small kindnesses, your honest efforts, your broken-hearted courage, and you bow. Because you realize enlightenment was never about rising above your life. It was about loving it all the way through. If you've walked with me through these pages, through myths, truths, stories, teachings, know this: you don't have to go to a monastery to awaken. You don't need to sit cross-legged for hours a day. You don't have to be anyone other than who you are right here, right now. You just need the willingness to stop running, to listen, to soften, to breathe, to bow to this one precious, unrepeatable moment. That, in the end, is the gift of awakening. Not freedom from life, but freedom within it. And may your final breath, whenever it comes, not be filled with fear, but with gratitude, for a life fully lived, for love fully given, for a heart that, even in its last beat, whispered, "I am awake." Chapter 7, the conclusion of the 6-chapter journey toward enlightenment, the journey that begins within. You've walked with me now through the myths, the teachings, the stories. You've looked into the heart of suffering, touched the possibility of peace, and discovered that enlightenment isn't some distant, shining mountain. It's the quiet shift in the soul that happens when we stop running and start seeing. Not just with the eyes, but with the heart, with presence, with compassion. Maybe you began this journey with questions about life, about death, about whether peace is still possible after so much loss, so much noise, so many years. And if you leave with anything, let it be this: you are not too late, you are not too broken, you are not too ordinary. The path of awakening doesn't require you to become someone else. It only asks that you become fully yourself, undefended, open, tender, and real. In fact, the life you have right now, the creases in your hands, the quiet in your home, the grief you carry, the love you still long to give, is the very ground where enlightenment flowers. You don't have to renounce anything to wake up. You just have to return to this breath, this moment, this step. And if you forget, that's okay. Come back again. Because awakening isn't a one-time moment, it's a daily remembering. A daily act of turning toward life instead of away from it. Let the past be what it was. Let the future be what it will, and let now be enough. And when the storms come, as they always do, may you meet them not with fear, but with the steady grace of someone who knows. This too is part of the path. In the end, what the Buddha offered wasn't a religion, it was a mirror. A way to look deeply and remember the truth you already know, that nothing needs to be added to make you whole. That no part of you needs to be erased to be worthy of peace. That the love you've been searching for is the same love that breathes quietly inside you now. So take one final breath here before you move on. Feel your feet on the ground. Feel the life still pulsing through you. Feel the softness of this moment. And go gently into the world, not as someone chasing enlightenment, but as someone who remembers it's already here.